This is the season of long gospel readings. And this one in particular today is long. And that's one of the points of the gospel. It's such a rich dialogue that takes place between this man and this woman. In order to really hear what's going on in this story, we have to remember last week's gospel reading. You'll remember that was the visit of Nicodemus to Jesus, and he came by night, and he says, we know that you are from God because you have that certain power, but, and Jesus says to him, well, you have to be born again. And Nicodemus says, how can a person be born again? Return to the womb. Jesus says, you must be born by water and the Spirit. And Nicodemus says, how can this be? And then Nicodemus disappears. Nicodemus is a Pharisee, a powerful man, a member of the Sanhedrin, an educated person. He is part of the power structure of the city of Jerusalem, and he's part of the power structure of the Jewish community. And that's it for the conversation with him. He kind of comes and engages Jesus and scratches his head and walks away. He'll come back a couple more times in the gospel, but never really with much clarity about where he stands. So we contrast that story of last week with the story of this week. Jesus, for some reason, has decided that he will return from Judea to Galilee through the area of Samaria. That is itself an odd choice. He doesn't have to go through Samaria to get from one to the other. And most Jews would avoid going through Samaria because there is a long history of animosity between the Samaritans and the Jews. It's rooted hundreds of years before this, at the time of when Jerusalem was destroyed and the Jews were taken into captivity in Babylon, but some remained. And those who remained in that particular section of the country intermarried with other peoples, with foreigners, and so automatically became sort of unclean from the Jewish point of view. And they continued to hold on to the Torah, the law, but they centered their worship around Mount Gerizim, which is north of Jerusalem, maybe 50 miles or so. And that's part of the story today. And so both Samaritans and Jews really disliked one another and didn't trust one another. So the fact that Jesus would go through Samaria by choice is itself already gives us an idea of what's going to happen. He goes, he sits down by the well, he's thirsty, and a Samaritan woman comes in the middle of the day. In the middle of the day, you remember Nicodemus came at night. The woman comes in the middle of the day. This is an event of clarity that happens at the well this morning, and he says to her, I need, give me something to drink. And she says to him, why do you, a Jewish man, ask something of me, a Samaritan woman? The bridging of the relationship right there is part of the heart of the matter. Jesus, as a Jewish male, would not be speaking with a Samaritan, and he would not be speaking with a woman. And it may be that this woman has some public sinful nature about her. We're not quite sure. So a good male Jew would not be talking to this person. And she is overwhelmed that he is talking to her, but he is thirsty, and he does need a drink. And so he's talking to her, and she says, why are you talking to me? And he says, well, if you know who it was that was talking to you, you would be able to receive living waters. It would well up to eternal life. And that kind of begins the dialogue between the two. And as we heard, this dialogue goes on for quite some time. And it's clearly a dialogue that's founded on mutual respect. They listen to one another. They bounce their questions off one another. They respond to each other as human beings. And in the process, the woman of Samaria is moved along. In coming to the well for some water, she comes to understand that the water he offers is a different kind of water, a deeper water, a transforming water. It can change her whole life. And in the process of that, at the end of that, she runs back to her city and says, he knows everything about me, and he still cares for me. He still loves me. He still paid attention to me. He still thinks that God's love will reach even me. Part of the question that she asks him is the one about what mountain you're going to worship on. Are we right that we should be worshiping on Gerizim, or are the Jews right that we should be worshiping in Jerusalem? And he says, neither one. The time is coming, he says. In fact, he says, it's already here, when true worshipers will worship in spirit and in truth. Not on that mountain, not on that mountain, but in spirit and in truth. That's a vision of God and worship with God that transcends both of their religious traditions. And because it transcends them both, it touches her own life. She recognizes in it an inclusivity which